Strand is a very good subclass within this long season because of the artifact perks. Because of this, I recently made a Strand Warlock build that excels in a lot of PVE content. This Warlock build inspired me to make an endgame Strand Hunter build for you all to enjoy. I think it's really good when played right, so with that, let's get right into it. For the exotic of this build, we're using the Assassins Cowl. This has the exotic perk, Vanishing Execution. Powered melee final blows, grants invisibility, and restores a portion of your health and shields. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the duration of the invisibility and the amount of health and shields restored. So with this in the Strand melee called the Threaded Spike, this will bounce between targets, doing a lot of damage. And even in GM level content, if you get some red bars weak and then throw your melee, you'll instantly get invisibility. And same thing with the finisher. When you finish a target and you're surrounded by a lot of enemies, once you're done finishing the target, you go right invisible so you can run away from that spot. So this is a very good exotic in my opinion. Talking about the melee, let's go into the subclass. For the super of this build, there's only one in this subclass called the Silk Strike. This basically gives you a rope dart, which you have 2 attacks and 1 mobility option. You can do the light attack, which is basically just swinging the rope forward, doing a lot of damage. And you're going to be using this attack for like bosses for single target damage. There's also another attack, which is the heavy attack, which basically throws your rope dart in a big circular motion, doing a lot of damage to everyone around you. This is good for just ad clear, and if you're getting surrounded by a lot of enemies, you can just use this. It will do a decent amount of damage to those enemies. Lastly, you have an infinite grapple with this super, which it does take some of the super energy when you do it, but it just helps with more movement for the super. You can also infinitely dodge with the super as well. For the dodge of this build, we're using the Gambler's Dodge. When you're dodging your enemies, this will fully recharge your melee energy, basically tying into the exotic to get more invisibility from our melees. For the melee, we have Threaded Spike like we mentioned before. When you throw this rope dart, it will sever targets, which is a 40% damage reduction from enemy damage, basically meaning they do 40% less damage to you. Once this melee is done hitting all the targets around it, it will start coming back to you and you can actually catch it if you push the melee button again. This will give you back some melee energy. For the grenade, we're using the Chakra Grenade. When you throw this, it will suspend all targets around it, basically immobilizing them. This grenade will also stun unstoppable champions because it has suspension in this grenade. This is a great tool just for crowd control, and since we have 3 other ways to get invisibility, having this as well is actually really beneficial. For the aspects of this build, we have Threaded Spectre and also Whirling Maelstrom. Threaded Spectre is actually one of the ways we're going to be going quote-unquote invisible, because it's not really invisibility like from our exotic, but when you activate your class ability, it'll leave behind a decoy. This decoy will draw all the attention from the nearby combatants, basically leaving you completely alone. But when an enemy comes up to it, or it takes enough damage, the clone will actually explode, doing damage from that, and also send out 2 threadlings doing damage from that as well. So it's kind of invisibility, because it's almost like a taunt. But from our exotic, like I said, you have the melee, when you get melee because you go invisible, and also you have the finisher, which will also make you invisible. So right there, there's 3 ways we're going to be going invisible with this build. For the Whirling Maelstrom aspect, destroying a tangle will leave a violent whirling mass of strand fibers, basically making like a Beyblade. This will also unravel targets, and paired with some of our artifact perks, this will be very beneficial to create more threadlings, which we'll get into very soon. For the fragments, we have Thread of Binding. Super final blows emit a suspending burst from your target. This is just for more crowd control from your super, and also if you're in that high level content and you pop your super, there's a lot of unstoppable champions, you can get a kill next to the unstoppable champion and it'll suspend that champion, basically stunning it. So it's basically another way we're going to be stunning unstoppable champions. For the next fragment, we have Thread of Continuity. Your suspend, unravel, and sever effects applied to targets have increased duration. With this build, we're going to have all 3 of those verbs, so we're basically just going to have our effects applied longer. But the main reason I put this on is just for the suspension. So normally without this fragment, your suspension will be lasting about 5 seconds. But with this fragment, it will be 7 seconds. So it's very beneficial for crowd control and just immobilizing a lot of targets for a long period of time. For the next fragment, we have Thread of Generation. Dealing damage generates grenade energy. With our Whirling Maelstrom aspect and the tangle from it, it will constantly be hitting targets over and over again, giving us a lot of grenade energy from our Chakra Grenade to suspend more targets. And also the Unravel will actually help with this as well. Our last fragment, we have Thread of Fury. Damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. Again, from our Whirling Maelstrom aspect, since it's hitting targets constantly, every target it hits, it's going to give you more melee energy back, basically giving your grenade and melee back constantly, which is very good for highlighting content, because yes, we do have the Gambler's Dodge, but to get up close, it's kind of hard sometimes, so just grabbing a tangle and throwing it into a big group of enemies and giving that grenade and melee energy constantly is very beneficial. Here are the full armor mods of this build. For the helmet, we have Power Preservation. Your super final blows creates extra orbs of power. This is for your allies. This is very beneficial because you can make up to 12 orbs just with your super, which is crazy and will definitely help out your teammates a lot. For the next mod, we have Heavy Ammo Finder. This just increases the drop chance of heavy ammo on a kill. And with this, make sure you're getting weapon kills because it only counts with the weapon kills, not ability kills. For the last mod on our helmet, we have Harmonic Siphon. Rapid strand weapon final blows creates an orb of power. With this build, you want to use strand weapons from our artifact perks and just from this, so we can create more orbs of power for you and your teammates. For the gauntlets, we have heavy handed. Your power melee final blows creates an orb of power. Since we're kind of focusing on our melee with this build to get the invisibility and more survivability, you will also be creating orbs of power from these melees when you get a kill, which will help tie into our armor charges. For the next two mods, we have Focusing Strike. What this does is it grants class ability energy when you cause damage with the power melee attack. And since we have two of these mods on, it's going to give us 17% of our class ability back instantly when we hit targets with our melee, which will be very good because we're tying into our Threaded Spectre as well, which is our other way to get invisibility with this build, and also just to get our melee back instantly when dodging near those targets. For the chest armor, we have Charged Up. This increases the maximum number of stacks of armor charge you can carry by 1, so going from 3 to 4 stacks, with any resist mods you want. For the boots, we have Innervation. It reduces the grenade cooldown each time we pick up an orb of power. Since we're making orb of power from our melee and also just our strand weapons, every time we pick up one of those orbs of power, it'll give us 10% to our grenade energy, which will also stack on top of our Thread of Generation from our Whirling Maelstrom, so we'll get our shotgun grenade pretty fast with this build, which basically means more suspension. For the next mod, we have Recuperation. Replenishes health each time pick up an orb of power. Since we're not using Thread of Warding with this build to get that 45% damage reduction from Woven Mail, this will just help keep that health up when we need it. And for the last mod, we have Strand Weapon Surge. Obviously use the surge you want for the weapons you're using, but I definitely recommend a strand weapon with this build, so giving that 10% damage bonus to that weapon is very beneficial just for more ad clear. For the class item of this build, we have Reaper. This is going to be the third way we're going to make an orb of power, but shortly after using your class ability, which will spawn that Threaded Spectre and also give your melee back when near targets, your next weapon final blow spawns an orb of power. Again, this will be a third way to get orbs with this build, which will tie into that 10% weapon bonus from our surge. For the next mod, we have Time Dilation. Your decaying armor charges has a longer duration. So normally without this mod it's 10 seconds, but with this mod it goes up to 15 seconds. So you're going to have that 10% weapon bonus for 15 seconds. For the next mod, we have Powerful Attraction. Automatically collects all the nearby orbs around you when you activate your class ability. So now when we activate our class ability, you get your melee back when near targets. You spawn that Threaded Spectre, which will basically make you go invisible, and now you'll collect all the orbs around you, which will tie into your grenade, your health, and also just that 10% weapon surge like we mentioned before. For the stats of this build, you want to build into Resilience, Discipline, and Mobility. First, you want to build into the Resilience first to get that 30% damage reduction from everything. And that's at 100 Resilience. Next, you can go either way with this. You can go either Discipline first or Mobility first, because they're both very beneficial with this build. If you go the Discipline route, it basically means you'll have more shotgun grenades for more suspension. If you go the Mobility route, you'll have more invisibility with the Threaded Spectre clone. I went with the Discipline because the shotgun grenade normally has a longer duration, so having that at 100 is very beneficial because you're going to be getting that shotgun grenade pretty fast. And with our dodge normally it's only 38 seconds, so it won't take that long for that to recharge. And since we have two Focusing Strike armor mods, this will also help it recharge faster. For the weapons of this build, I'm just going to be mentioning strand weapons and also your heavy and special weapon that I like to enjoy with this build. My favorite strand weapon to use with all strand builds, in my opinion, is the Quicksilver Storm. You just can't go wrong with it. It turns into a grenade, has little micro missiles, and it's a 720 auto, which is my favorite. But if you're kind of over Quicksilver Storm, you can obviously go with Wishkeeper. This is the new build that came out this season, and this will suspend targets after stacking some Snare Weaver arrows. And this is just for if you want to tie in more into that suspension. Another good weapon is actually the Vengeful Whisper. This is from the new dungeon. This is a random drop, so you can't focus and craft it, but a good roll I saw with it is Explosive Head and Successful Warm-Up. Another great weapon to use with this build is Scatter Signal. This is with Overflow and Controlled Burst, but this does a lot of damage to bosses and other high health enemies, and I definitely recommend picking this up, and this is from the season. The secondary I like to use with this build is Indebted Kindness. This is a rocket pistol, and it's very good in my opinion. You can also go for Barrens or any other special weapon you like using. But if you're using the Scatter Signal, you can use like Subjunctive, which is from this season, or just any other primary weapon you want to use with this build. For heavy weapon, obviously Apex Predator is very good for endgame content. You can also use the Crux Rocket, which is a roll drop, so good luck trying to farm that. You can also use the Marcado 45. I'm trying to get Demolitionist and a damage perk or a hatchling perk with this. This is a Strand Machine Gun, which is adaptive frame, which is the best in my opinion. It'll probably be really good with this build. But yeah, either way, I definitely recommend using a strand weapon with this build because artifact perks within the season will definitely benefit from these weapons. Let's dive into these artifact perks. There's only two I really want to talk about. First of all, we have Unraveling Orbs. Picking up an orb of power grants strand weapons unraveling rounds. So this will benefit your strand weapon substantially by giving it unraveling rounds, just by picking up an overpower. And secondly, we have Horde Shuttle. Damaging unraveled targets with the weapon occasionally spawns a threadling. You could probably see the synergy from these two things. So every time you pick up an orb, it'll give you unraveling rounds, and when you damage those unraveled targets, it will constantly spawn a threadling, depending on the rank of the target. But this is very good for just ad clear in general, and will also help control the ads. You could also use Dragon's Bite. Breaking a shield with a strand weapon has a chance to suspend the target. So this is very good for endgame content if you just need a suspension from these targets. But either way, the unraveling orbs and Horde Shuttle are definitely the ones you want to pick within this artifact this season. And that brings us into the gameplay loop. Firstly, what you want to do is you want to throw your Shackle Grenade. This will suspend all the targets around that grenade, basically immobilizing them. This will also stun unstoppable champions, and the suspension from the grenade will also last longer from our threaded continuity fragment. After throwing this grenade, you want to use your melee. This is your threaded spike. When using this melee, it will sever all the targets it hits, basically doing a 40% damage reduction to their damage, and this will bounce between targets rapidly. This melee will also come back to you. You can also catch it from your melee energy, but I feel like you don't really have to do that all the time. Next, when your melee gets a kill, it will make us invisible from Assassin's Cowl. This will also restore a portion of your health and shields instantly. After this, that same kill will also spawn an orb of power. This is from our heavy-handed armor mod. This melee will also generate more class ability energy from our 2 stacks of focusing strike. And this sever effect from this melee will last longer from our threaded continuity fragment. When this melee also gets a kill, it will spawn a tangle. This tangle can be either shot or thrown, which will turn into a Beyblade. This is from our Whirling Maelstrom aspect. This Beyblade will do a lot of damage to targets and it will track them, unraveling them as well. And the unravel can tie into our artifact perks. Basically, when you hit the unraveled target, it will spawn threadlings as well. This Beyblade, when it's hitting targets over and over again, it will generate us more grenade energy from Thread of Generation, and also it will generate us more melee energy from Thread of Fury, which is very beneficial in endgame content. Next, you want to use your class ability, which is also your Threaded Spectre. This will make you and actually nearby allies invisible because everything in the area is drawn to this decoy. This decoy, when enemies are near it, or when it was shot enough, this decoy will explode, doing damage from that, and also it will send out 2 threadlings, doing damage from that as well. When using your class ability, you will pick up all the orbs around you from our powerful attraction armor mod, and after you use the class ability and get a weapon kill, you'll get an orb of power from our Reaper armor mod. You can use your super at any point with this build for either boss damage or ad clear. If you're using the super for boss damage, make sure to use the light attack only. This will do a lot of damage over and over again, which is very good for sustained damage. Our super is also buffed from our Thread of Binding fragment, basically giving us suspension every time we get a kill with our super. Your super will also generate more orbs from power preservation, going up to like 12 orbs, which will definitely benefit your teammates substantially. Next, let's talk about your armor mods and armor charges. Again, we have 3 ways to make orbs with this build, from Harmonic Siphon, Heavy Handed, and Reaper. And every time we pick up one of those orbs, it'll give us 10% grenade energy from our armor mod Innervation. It'll give us a big chunk of health from Recuperation, and also it'll give us a 10% weapon boost to our Surge mod. And make sure to change this element to the weapons you're using. This Surge mod will be buffed from time dilation, going from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. And whenever you pick up an orb, the strand weapons that you're using, it will give them unraveling rounds. Again, this will tie into our Horde Shuttle perk, basically giving us threadlings every time we damage unraveled targets. And again, for weapons, my favorite weapons to use with this build is Quicksilver Storm, any special of your choice. My choice is Indebted Kindness, and also Apex Predator, or just a good heavy in general. And again, you can also use Wishkeeper if you want to build more into that suspension. But yeah, that's basically it for the build. If you have a build that you really enjoy, make sure to put it in the comments below. I'll be reading all the comments you guys put down there. But if you enjoyed this build, the game link will be in the video description. And make sure to join our Discord, which is also linked down below. I also stream Tuesday to Thursday every week from 7 p.m. Eastern to 12. So make sure to come check that out. Right now we're trying to do solo flawless for all the dungeons. I just completed Warlord's Ruin and also Goes to the Deep yesterday in the time of recording this. And also we're doing a lot of raids, which I'll be happy to teach a lot of you if you need it. That link for my Twitch will also be in the video description as well. If you enjoyed this build, make sure to like and subscribe. I appreciate you all so much. We just hit 500 not too long ago and we're already at 600 subscribers. So I appreciate you all so much and thank you very much for all the support. And with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and I'll see you in the next one.